here we are today. I am honored to be sitting down with Dr. Joe Dispenza, one of the greatest teachers and leaders of our time, a real pioneer. You are teaching us new ways of being and, of course, doing in the world, a new model of change. You are leading us fearlessly, passionately, relentlessly, wholeheartedly into the new paradigm of how we see ourselves and one another and the planet. So you're guiding us back to our divinity through science, though. So you have been brilliant at monitoring and gathering data from early on in your work, because as you say, the modern language of mysticism is science. So you are leading the way in terms of what we are capable of and documenting what's going on in our brains and bodies whilst you're doing it. And we are at a very exciting time, aren't we? Not just in history, but I think in your career, where you have now got many prestigious universities wanting to study your work and what on earth your students are doing. So you've often said to us, let's not wait for science to tell us what's possible. Let's have science come and study us to catch up. And it's happening. So I'm really excited, and I'd love to get into some of that research. But before we get into that, I'd like to start here. So you run week-long events around the world, literally taking 1,000, 2,000 people sometimes at a time beyond themselves, knocking them off their current timelines and changing lives in a very profound way. And I have been very blessed with having attended many of these events, and every single time I witness something else that expands my own perceptions of what's possible. You know, so miracles are now the norm in our community and at these events, and that it's a phenomenal place to live from. So at these events, you push us to get beyond ourselves. And what we find time and time again is that when we get beyond ourselves, we find something greater, we find wholeness. And it's in that wholeness that we find the magic. So I'd love to start there, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sally. I'm just a curious person, always have been interested in human potential. And I think this particular time in history, people are waking up to possibilities. And you have to admit that when you become aware of something that didn't exist before, there's a change in consciousness. And so I think people, because of information at this current time in history, are just more informed. And because they're more informed, they're more conscious of possibilities. And so when you take a group of people and you give them sound scientific information, and as you said, science to me is the contemporary language of mysticism, that science can demystify the mystical. And if you can combine a quantum model of reality that says that somehow you're connected to everything, that your thoughts have an effect on the nature of reality, and if mind is an important element of that, then we better study and understand what mind is. So if you can combine some neuroscience, some neuroendocrinology with some psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, and epigenetics that says that you're not doomed by your genes to be a certain way your entire life, that you could actually change your gene expression. So if you can take those ideals, those different models of science, and come up with something that represents a new model of being, and people can philosophically, theoretically, and intellectually understand it to the point where they can repeat it. It's important for them to repeat it, because if they can't repeat it, it's not wired in their brain. So if they can explain the what and the why and understand that model, we know that then the how gets a little bit easier. So if you can then put people in the practical experience of taking that information, that philosophical information, and making it practical, initiating it, applying it, personalizing it, demonstrating in some way, a certain percentage of people will actually do it properly, and they'll experience some type of transformation, some type of change. The experience then will enrich their brain circuitry and produce a feeling. And that feeling then teaches the body to understand what the mind is intellectually understood. So when we started out on this journey, it was primarily philosophical. It was, yeah, you could probably heal your body. Yeah, you could probably create a better life. But when we started actually seeing people change their health to all kinds of great measures, um, that's when I knew that it was time that we had to start taking measurements and looking to see what was going on in the brain, what was going on in the heart, in the gene expression, in the immune system, and in cellular biology, cellular health. And so we assembled a team of scientists and researchers to study common people, not anybody that was different, that had 40 years of meditation experience or was in a monastery or had any intellectual training. We wanted to just focus on common people. And so the research and the way we teach what we teach is from looking at what works and what doesn't work. We've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of brains. We've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of different hearts. So we've studied all kinds of gene expressions. We've done, we've looked to see what it is that's actually built. Like, how do we take it from the brain to the body and all the way down to the cell? And, what is that model? And so we have great evidence now in our scientific research about human potential. Mm. And we have great evidence and testimony in so many people who have actually applied what this formula of understanding of change could be. Yes. And we started seeing them standing up saying, my cancer's gone, my MS is gone, my lupus is gone, my Parkinson's is gone. I was paralyzed, now I can lift my arm. I was blind, I could see. I was deaf, I can hear. You start seeing some really dramatic testimony, and that testimony is the truth. That is that person is an example of the truth. And when people stand on the stage in our workshops and they tell their story of how they heal themselves, I just witnessed one 2 days ago at a workshop I was just at, and I watched the audience, and there wasn't a person moving. Everybody was just fixed on this person telling the story of how she healed herself, and it was beautiful. And she had all the scans, all the results, and everything was, and it's a 4-minute mile. Mm-hmm. You break that level of consciousness, back to your question. And so you pierce through a level of unconsciousness to a greater level of consciousness. Now, there's evidence in front of you. It's possible, a greater possibility, a greater consciousness. Someone left a footprint for someone else to step into. And so we have evidence and testimony of evidence in scientific measurements, and evidence becomes the loudest voice. And so what we noticed is that if we could teach people really how to get beyond themselves, and what would, because that's what you asked, what does that mean? And we saw people's brains get worse when they were analyzing their life and trying to figure out their life, that they were driving the brain into higher stress levels and higher arousal states and making the brain more incoherent. We saw that analysis isn't going to do anything, that we have to get beyond the analytical mind. So we started figuring out ways to build an understanding of a model that we could teach people, that they could, by volition, be able to change their brain waves and learn how to do that. And what was it that helped them do that? And once they got beyond their conscious mind into their subconscious mind, then could they rewrite a program? Could they rewrite a behavior? Could they change some fundamental aspect of themselves? And if it was no longer about them healing, but it was more about whatever it was that the program was in the way of them healing, that's what it became about. They became more interested in the process of change than, and they understood that the side effect of that would be a change in their health, which is pretty much what we see over and over again. So it became something different, and we were able to teach it based on what we studied. And we know so many things about how the brain and body work, and now there's a movement taking place, and there's enough people doing it that it is becoming a little bit more normal, which is a great time for me. Absolutely.
It's incredible. And even, despite, maybe in spite of COVID, this community has been building and building and building. You were so gracious to do some online courses for us so that we could really keep that group coherence, that group consciousness within this work. Because yes, there is something, isn't there, about doing it within a group, that group consciousness that's more powerful. When I'm sitting here meditating on my own, you can almost tap in with those people you've been with before. But when you're in a room with 1,000, 2,000 people, incredible things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've actually measured the energy in the room. And we know that when people start getting their energy, we know you can measure, energy. When people's energy becomes more coherent, the interference constructively begins to build bigger amplitudes, and that's greater energy. So there literally is a group of people that are becoming more entrained, more coherent, and that coherent energy creates the energy for healing, or the energy for miracles, the energy for the mystical. It's in the air, because people are actually changing their energy, and it's contributing to the field, in a powerful way.
Yes. And you always say to us, you cannot change until you change your energy. And this is what it's all about, isn't it? So you've mentioned there healing. And at these week-long events, we go, we spend the week. You forcibly take us into a journey beyond ourselves. We find this wholeness. We find everything we want within there. We don't want for anything more. But then what can we do with this? How can we help other people? How can we help? How can we serve? And by the end of the week longs, you have us healing other people. So I know that this is one of your happy places to be, is in a room full of people with the intent that want to heal and the energy that's high enough that we can do great things. Do you want to talk about that for a little?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me finish that thought on wholeness, because one of the things that I did discover as a result of talking to numerous people that really experienced profound transformation is that people think, they come to the work for a lot of reasons. They may want to come for health, they may want to come for wealth, they want to come for success or the mystical, or just to be a better person. But what we found out over time is what everybody really wants is wholeness. That it's the process of becoming that really makes the difference. And when people start really connecting to the emotions of their future before they happen, before that experience happens, they feel like they're already in the experience. They feel like it's already happened, and that's an important element for the process of creation, because otherwise we're creating from separation or lack. And when people start managing their intentional thoughts, when they manage their emotional states, when they trade survival and limiting emotions for elevated emotions, and you teach them a practical tool on how to get back into a state of more wholeness, they're starting to demonstrate a level of self-love. And we see what that looks like in the heart. It gets highly organized and highly coherent. We see it, what happens in the brain. It gets aroused, and the arousal is not fear, and the arousal is not pain, and the arousal is not aggression. The arousal is the state of ecstasy, or the state of bliss, and it's coming from within the person. Now, this is a important point, because now they realize that there's nothing out there that they thought that they want could make them feel the way they're feeling when they start managing their inner world, right? So you start seeing that people start feeling like they're so whole they no longer want anything. And that tends to be the paradox of how their dreams actually happen, because now they're no longer creating from separation or polarity. In fact, they're creating from wholeness, and wholeness means that it already has happened on a biological level for people. So learning how to create from wholeness then creates this crazy thing where you feel so amazing. You feel so in love with life. You feel so grateful to be alive that you want other people to feel the way you feel. And the only way you can do that is to give. And the act of giving actually creates more of that feeling, which creates more of the chemicals for you to want to give. And all of a sudden you start creating a species of people that are really interested in caring for one another and being kind to one another, and loving one another, and supporting one another, and informing one another, and healing one another. It's just what the empathy of the species really is about, So by the end of our week longs, many people we can see on their physiological measurements are very, very coherent and very orderly, and they're filled with love. They're filled with a love of life. They're filled with a joy for existence. They're filled with just the gratitude of being alive. And so if we could teach people a model of healing, and we can show them that there's research that shows that it's not matter that's emitting a field of energy. It's really that the field of energy is creating matter. So if you change the field, you change the hologram in three-dimensional reality. So we build a model of understanding that then takes the person's work from the entire week and builds a bigger model of application. But instead of it having it be about their wealth or about their new relationship or their new career, it's about someone else. And now they are going to give life to another person's life, and they're going to love another person into life. And they understand that they would have to get beyond their associations to everything physical and known. They practiced that all week. They've learned how to create from the field instead of from matter. They're going to have to open their heart, because once energy makes it to the heart, it begins to produce a non-local effect, a connecting effect. It also is a frequency of more wholeness and oneness, which it takes to heal. And they're going to build a bigger model and apply all of that to another person. And they're going to have it be about them. And so they understand the science of all of it. And we cut people loose. And if you asked Joe Dispenza a year ago, if he thought he would be seeing things that he's seeing now, I probably would have said maybe once or twice in my lifetime. But now we have so many universities, so many scholars, so many scientists caught up in the phenomena of what's going on, because our community is getting really good at it, and they're hitting targets, and they're changing people's lives dramatically. And you would think, oh yeah, now they can say that they're a healer and they can, go out and make money and heal. They don't do that. They do it for the mission of what it feels like to be on a call with a mother whose child had no attention and no consciousness, never connected with her siblings, and all of a sudden is smiling and trying to talk to her siblings. And you're on the call, and everybody that was a healer is celebrating this person's change. And the emotion that you feel from that is nothing other than this divine state of love. Yes. And then that new experience is greater than any sports car, any wardrobe, any drug. This is something different, and they do it for that feeling. And when that feeling happens, then they have to give again. And so they're moving closer to the divine every time they heal somebody. And so we're doing a lot of data collection right now on our remote healings. We have IRB medical studies that we're partnering with universities, and we're measuring people's before and after subjective experiences. And we're also doing DNA sampling before and after their healings. And we're having the certain groups wear HRV monitors to regulate heart coherence. And the healee, we're measuring to see if they're going into heart coherence at the same exact time as the healers. And so, we're doing all these studies to really change the conversation, really, in medicine. And so it's a pretty exciting time. And my goodness, there have been so many wonderful healings that have taken place in our community.
Yes, and it's phenomenal. It is phenomenal, and it's easy, I guess. Well, I don't know if it is easy, but when something becomes the norm, it's your norm, and it's easy to we have to get outside that sometimes and look back at what we're doing, because it is phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. For me, you're teaching us the ultimate in self-empowerment. So self-management, self-empowerment, because when we can manage ourselves, internally, as opposed to being at the mercy of something external outside of ourselves. This is the ultimate, but not just being able to manage ourselves, but when we find the essence, the joy, the love of life, that's always there, and we can tap into that. And then all we want to do is help others and give. That's the world that I want my children to live in. That's the world that I want to see. And we're doing it. You're doing it in communities around the world. Every month you're doing this. And it's so exciting now that the universities are literally, as you've said to us for years, we're doing it here. They're going to soon take notice and come and measure us. So you've mentioned, some of the measurements you're doing with the healing and heart coherence. And we know, because you've already measured that years years ago that we, when, that heart coherence is catching in a way. When we go into heart coherence and we have the intent, then somebody else can go into heart coherence. You've measured that a gazillion times. Let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned the research, about the super exciting new research that you're doing with the immune system, because this is groundbreaking.
Yeah, well, there's even more. We found out so many things just in the last couple of months, and I just was today reading through some emails. I was traveling, but once again, this is a never-ending process of discovery. We're so excited about some of the things that we've been doing because a few people had come to our workshops that were in a position of leadership and research. And they witnessed people on the stage talking about stage 4 cancer going away, and they saw their pre and post measurements and their metastatic changes out of their structure, which is amazing. And so we assembled some more researchers on a team, and we started working with the universities. And last February we were doing some measurements. We were drawing blood before and after 7-day event. And we had control group, people that were not in the event, that were staying at the hotel, that agreed to be part of the study. We had novice meditators, beginning meditators that had just come to the work, just learned how to do it. And then we had people that had been doing meditation for more than 6 months, and for the most part, at least 5 to 7 times a week. So we called those advanced or experienced meditators. And we measured their brains before and after. We measured their brains at many meditations during real-time meditations. We wanted to see the changes weren't just in their mind, but they were actually in their brain. We had them wearing HRV monitors to monitor their heart rate variability, along with along with all these blood measurements. And right away after the event was over, I got a very quick call from the senior research analyst there, the senior vice chair at the department there for cellular biology. And he said, there's some really compelling things going on right away. And we were measuring over 1,000 metabolic markers on if a cell is in a state of repair and growth, or a cell is in a state of emergency or breakdown. And so we had a few people that had come that were looked very sick on their cellular function at the beginning of the event. But 1 week later, there was a dramatic drop, like straight down, that you just never see. It was that significant. And so there were a few like that, but one in particular that was very, very, very significant. And turns out that this person also had a very profound mystical experience that he wrote about. And I didn't know that he was that test subject. I had read the testimonial, and it was outstanding. I knew the guy had a really transcendental experience. And so it turned out to be him, and his heart rate variability measurements showed the amplitudes were 3 times as high as normal. So he wasn't feeling just a little love.
No,
he was feeling a tremendous amount of love. And I didn't know this, but when in his subjective story that he sent in, it was so big, it scared him. I mean, like, you have to relax into it. It's not something you just let go into. It was that big for him.
yeah.
So, and then he had some really substantial brain changes. And so we decided to take a very close look at him. And then we started thinking about looking at the National Institutes of Health in the United States was deciding to put a lot of money towards the funding for COVID, but they wanted to see if there were any mind-body factors that could be isolated. So we saw the grant advertisement, and we thought we would write a grant for to see if we could find, with the induction of any harvestable factors from the result of meditation, contemplative practices, or self-regulation, for the treatment and management and prevention of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. So we started writing this grant, and then the very last day of the grant, we thought, my goodness, why don't we take a pseudovirus that's exact same shape as the SARS-CoV virus, put a radioactive marker in it, and let's see if we that virus behaves just like the SARS virus. Let's see what happens when we look at advanced meditators' blood. And so what we saw was if the plasma got infected, the radioactive dye would turn the microscopic field bright red. And so you would, as you would expect, you'd see a lot of red stain in the microscopic field of most people. But at the end of the week long, there was very, very hardly any red in the microscopic field, which meant that there was a viral resistance to the SARS virus and the pseudovirus, and that on some level the plasma was not taking the viral load. So we started studying the electron microscopes, and we saw that control groups had the virus in the cell. The novice meditators had some virus outside the cell, some inside the cell. But the experienced meditators, you could see the virus outside the cell. It just wouldn't let the SARS in. So but when we heated it, what happened was the plasma got infected. So now we know it's a protein, because proteins break down with temperature. So now we're looking at all the different immunoglobulins and looking at all the pathways and studying all those effects. But it's a super exciting time, because there's so much evidence to show that that when you self-regulate, you're more resistant to your environment.
Yeah. And this is the time. This is the time that it's needed the most. So it's so exciting, and congratulations for getting, for all of this. I mean, it's such an exciting time, and I'm so happy that science is catching up. And it's kind of a watch this space, right? Because the science is coming in every day, and the research is coming in every day. So it's a watch this space of what's going to happen. So
yeah, we just took the blood from experienced meditators and subject them to aggressive cancer cells, and we saw that the mitochondrial activity in the cancer cell, which is the energy of the cell, diminished by 70%. That's an incredible number. And it was basically taking the wind out of the sails of the cancer cell. It was taking away the energy that causes them to be immortal. So we're starting to find all this incredible, really incredible stuff, and there's more, and it's so incredibly exciting.
It is. And it's just opening the can, isn't it? It's just opening the can, and people are willing to come and look at this. I mean, anyone who's been to a 7-day retreat has seen those people standing on the stage. We know, once you see miracles before your eyes, there's no, as you say, going back to normal. We know that this is possible. But for those of us who need this, we believe science. So now we're getting the science as well as these anecdotes, of which there's thousands and thousands and thousands. I'm going to put the testimonial link under this video, because anybody, just click on the testimonials. You can search for any condition. There's somebody saying, oh my gosh, I didn't believe this was true. I went in, had a go, and here's my results. Like, it's just inspiring for anybody. So here's a question for you, because I know that you would say 10 years ago, you didn't think that you'd be here. What's the future? What do you see now ahead? Because it's exponentially going off, isn't it?
Well, I would hope that that we can demystify the process of change, that we can break it down to a point where a person doesn't have to wait for crisis or disease or diagnosis or loss or betrayal or some crisis in their life where they really decide to change. That if we can provide people the understandings of how to do that, I think, and make it more practical, I think hopefully more people will utilize it and learn and change in a state of joy and inspiration instead of pain and suffering. I would also love to see that, and this is happening right now, that the other elements of healthcare and chronic health conditions be addressed, which has to do with lifestyle and teaching people how to think differently and how to make different choices and how to behave differently and how to create new experiences and how to feel differently and with the understanding in medicine that could potentially produce a change in a person's health, albeit if they take medications, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, exercise, doesn't matter to me. It's just that if that emotional component is never addressed then the person never returns back to homeostasis and balance. And that's 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a healthcare facility is walking in because of that. So the responsibility for the patient then in understanding that they have a hand in their health and in their choices, and teaching people then that meditation is something that's normal, that it's a great way to reset. It's a great way to get your body back into autonomic regulation instead of autonomic dysregulation, which is stress. And then of course that 4-minute mile, that people see that there are options to change terminal conditions and other health conditions if the person keeps showing up for themselves and keeps applying it. And certainly that I'm not trying to push positive thinking or positive psychology. I'm hopeful that that it's seen as something else, but really some practical applications for people. So we don't go so quickly into what's predictable and what's normal, and that people live healthier and happier lives, and that we do learn how to get along and take care of one another and heal one another, and really hopefully in a different world.
Yes. And it's about that taking personal responsibility. I think it's such a good 2 words, because it's also personal responsibility of our own sovereignty, of our own divinity, of our own greatness. And I think you say this as well, this is not the time just to know, because there's an awful lot of people, we've got Dr. Google now, we can find the information ourselves, but as you say, it's the time to know how. And what you're doing is giving us the formula. In fact, you've just got a new course out called The Formula. So, I mean, you can't make it any more simple. You are just a genius at taking these, this multi-scientific approach and putting it into simple models for us to look, breaking it down simpler and simpler and simpler until we get it. So thank you for doing that. I've got my eye on the clock. I'm aware of your time. You've just reminded me, though, that, in your brilliance at taking complex information and breaking it down for us into simple models. And you're doing this on a mass scale with your events. The community is now huge community. How many people are in the community now? Is that
a lot? There are a lot of people.
There's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, and probably millions who are in this community, and we're it's huge. And anyone who goes to an advanced retreat doesn't come back the same. They just don't. So it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. But you also work with the world and the change model in a different way too, because you work in organizations. And you've just reminded me that we should mention this, because lots of people don't know this, but you have an incredible network of people out there going into businesses, huge corporations, and changing up, the way that we think and feel and the results that we get, so that we've got sustainable change. And I'd love you to just tell us some of the results you've seen from that work, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I mean, the whole reason that we decided to do something in the corporate world is because the majority of people that are living in the corporate world or living and working are unhappy, and they're actively disengaged in the work that they do. And companies and organizations are learning that a happy employee is a healthy employee. Everybody's talking to people how to be more innovative, be more creative, be more communicative, but nobody teaches anybody how to be anything. And they spend the majority of their time in emergency, and no organism in nature can live in emergencies, let alone an organization that's based on people. Sooner or later, those people will break down. And then what is it to change again? How do we teach that? And how does a person learn that they can manage their emotional state, and what happens to them when they don't, and what the outcome is, how that is biological, and what that does to ourselves, and also in how we communicate with one another. So we have these courses that we offer companies and organizations, and we teach all those things. And the outcome is that we want people to be more of all those things that they would love to see others be. And so how do you change a culture is you change individuals. And so we do a lot of cultural change, and we work with Sony and Cisco and Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson and Google and Microsoft. And, we've worked with a lot of big banks and companies around the world. And business leaders right now are really interested in the model of leadership and what it really means to lead. And so conversations have changed dramatically. And I think change has to happen from the bottom up and the top down. And so we have a pretty decent corporate model of what we teach, and people seem to do really well with it. My trainers are very intelligent, very smart, very, very, very proficient people.
Yeah, super cool. And they're all trained by you. So they are.
I don't know.
Well, thank you so much. I want to leave on this one question. Apart from people coming, digging into the books, which we're going to list down here, coming to the retreats, which I implore all of everybody watching to get to a retreat. We can't describe it. You just got to go. You just got to go. What's one thing, if I had to narrow it down and ask you, what's one thing that if someone goes, I want to change up my life, what's one thing that they can do right now to start?
That's a great question. Well, let's just assume in the principle that your personality creates your personal reality. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So the present personality who's listening to this program has created the present personal reality called their life or your life, which means if you want to create a new personal reality, a new life, you're going to have to change your personality. Mm-hmm. And that means you're going to have to start thinking about what you've been thinking about and decide if you still want to accept, believe, and surrender to that thought as if it's true, or do you want to actually have a different thought? So what thoughts do you want to change? And if you looked at how you spoke and how you behaved, if you complained, if you made excuses, if you felt sorry for yourself, if you mismanaged your time, whatever it is, and you didn't want to be that person any longer, if you could become conscious of those unconscious habits or behaviors, you would be in the process of change. And then if you said, listen, how do I finish my day? Do I finish my day feeling sad and tired and unhappy and suffering? Is that the emotions that I want to live by every day? No, I want to be happy. Well, I got to stop feeling unhappy then. So if a person took the time to write down a couple thoughts they wanted to change, a couple behaviors they would like to modify, and certain emotions that they would like to stay away from. The word meditation literally means to become familiar with. And those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that have become attitudes or habits or emotional conditioning is just something that we've done so many times that it's automatic now. We're unconscious to them. So we have to become conscious of those unconscious states. And that is kind of breaking the habit of being the old self. So to know thyself is such an important element if you truly want to then make a change. And so then the next question would be, well, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And if I put my attention and intention behind it, I could begin to install the neurological hardware. Keep practicing it, firing and wiring, and it becomes a software program. It becomes more automatic. That's the new voice in your head. You installed that. And then if you said, how do I want to be with my children? How do I want to be with my partner? How do I want to be at work? How do I want to be in traffic? How do I want to be when I'm by myself? And what would a great person do? What would love look like today? I don't know. What would it look like for me to master myself? And you sat down and closed your eyes and you rehearsed in your mind what you were going to do differently. The act of mental rehearsal begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you already did it. Now the brain's no longer a record of the past. Now it becomes a map to the future. You're priming it to the future. Install the hardware and keep doing it, firing and wiring. The hardware becomes a software program. You automatically behave like that person. No magic there. You install the circuitry. Then if you said, well, look, I truly do want to be a happy person, and I do want to be in love with life, and I do want to feel worthy to receive things, and I do want to feel grateful. I'm done feeling suffering and pain and unhappiness. then you would have to practice actually feeling those feelings. There's no mystery there. You'd have to become familiar with those emotions, and you'd have to sit there and say, can I teach my body emotionally what my future self will feel like before I'm it? Because that's how you're going to become it. And if you keep trading those limited emotions for these other emotions, these new chemicals, it'll begin to become familiar to you, and you'll become familiar in thought, in act, and in feeling. And so if people took a little bit of time to be in the never-ending process of self-discovery of how we did in our day in terms of evolution, God, we could demystify the process, and people would begin to see changes in their life as a result of it. And that's why we do it. I mean, we shouldn't do it for any other reason than if we truly change, our life should change. And I think most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality. And many times it doesn't work. We literally have to become someone else. So I like to demystify that process of, unlearning and relearning, breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing a new self.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So you've given us such a lot. You've given us the starting point. I'm going to put all the information of how we can do this and get more information underneath this video. I want to thank you deeply from my heart for everything you do in the world, the way that you're leading us into this new fantastic paradigm where we're kinder, more compassionate, more caring, more full. That's a good world to walk into. So let's go. Thank you for leading us.
You're welcome, Sally. Thank you for your work also.
Thank you so much for your time today. Speak to you soon.
Okay, thank you.